This story comes from a small, tight-knit farming community in western Ohio. For privacy and security reasons, the names of the town and the people involved have been changed. We will refer to the young woman at the center of this experience as Brooklyn. Brooklyn's husband, David, was an active-duty soldier in the U.S. Army. After serving overseas for nearly a year, he had finally returned home to their rural Ohio farmhouse for a few weeks of leave. The surrounding landscape was typical of the Midwest. Vast, endless cornfields, weathered historic barns, and long, empty country roads that stretched on for miles. During the day, the area felt peaceful, almost serene, but on stormy nights, that quiet beauty completely transformed into something deeply unsettling. It happened toward the very end of autumn. Early that afternoon, the Weather Service issued a severe thunderstorm warning for the entire county. Long before darkness actually fell, thick, black clouds rolled in, completely swallowing the sky and casting an unnatural twilight over the fields. Around late afternoon, David left the house to drive down to the local supermarket. He needed to pick up a few household essentials, and he promised Brooklyn he would also bring back some fresh blueberries, which were her absolute favorite. That left Brooklyn alone in the farmhouse with her elderly mother-in-law, Eleanor. Like any other evening, Eleanor took her medication early and went to sleep in her ground floor bedroom. As night began to fall, the storm hit with full force. Within minutes, a massive lightning strike knocked out power to the entire area. The house plunged into pitch-black darkness. Brooklyn lit an old kerosene lantern and carried it into the master bedroom. She tried calling David's cell phone repeatedly, but the screen just showed no service. The local cell towers were completely down. By around 9:30 p.m., the storm was raging outside. Inside the house, the silence was suffocating. The only sound was the wind howling against the wooden siding. And then it happened. A light, rhythmic tapping vibrated against the bedroom window. Once, then again. Then came a voice. It was deeply familiar. "Brooklyn, open the window." She pulled the heavy curtain aside and peered out into the darkness. In the dim, flickering glow of the kerosene lantern, framed by sudden flashes of lightning, she saw him. David was standing right there, just outside the glass. Water was streaming down from his hair. His clothes were completely soaked through, clinging to his skin. In one hand, he held a brown paper grocery bag. Through the wet top of the bag, she could clearly see a plastic container of fresh blueberries. David spoke again, his voice muffled by the glass but unmistakable. "The front door is jammed. The lock must be rusted or stuck from the moisture. Please, go around to the back porch and let me in." The scene looked so completely normal, so expected, that Brooklyn had absolutely no reason to doubt it. Her husband was home, and he was freezing. Brooklyn grabbed an umbrella and hurried through the dark house to the back door. She unlocked it and threw it open, expecting to see her shivering husband. A blast of freezing wet wind rushed into the kitchen, blowing out the lantern's flame. But outside, there was no one. The back porch was completely empty. The backyard was dark and still. She looked toward the driveway. There was no truck. At first, she thought David was just playing a cruel joke on her, trying to scare her in the dark. She stepped out slightly, calling his name into the rain. There was no answer, only the deafening roar of the storm. She shut the door, locked it tight, and relit the lantern. As she turned around, she gasped. Her mother-in-law, Eleanor, was standing at the end of the hallway, holding her own lantern. The old woman looked at her, her eyes wide, and asked, "Who are you looking for out there in this weather?" Brooklyn, her heart racing, explained exactly what had just happened at the bedroom window. Eleanor stood perfectly still, staring toward the dark window for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "David isn't back yet, Brooklyn. His truck isn't in the driveway." Only a few seconds after the words left Eleanor's mouth, headlights cut through the darkness outside. A Ford F-150 truck pulled up and parked in front of the house. David got out, holding an umbrella over his head, and walked up to the house. When he stepped through the front door, Brooklyn noticed his clothes were almost completely dry. He shook off his umbrella and smiled. A massive oak tree collapsed across the main road. The police blocked it off completely, and I had to take a massive detour through the backcountry roads. That's why I'm so late. My phone didn't have a single bar of signal out there. He walked over to the kitchen table, set down a brown paper grocery bag, and grinned. "But I didn't forget your blueberries." Brooklyn stood frozen. She could barely form a sentence. She managed to ask just one question. Did you get caught in the rain at all tonight, David?" David looked at her, deeply confused. "No. Why would I? I used the umbrella from the truck straight to the porch. Why do you ask?" Brooklyn didn't answer. She walked back into the bedroom, her hands shaking violently. She pulled back the window curtain. Outside, in the thick mud beneath the window, there were no footprints. Not a single shoe print. Not a single track in the dirt. But there, on the outside of the window pane, dripping slowly in the rain, were 5 unnaturally long, wet streaks, clear as day, like the imprint of an impossibly elongated hand. Eleanor walked up behind her and stared at the glass for a long time. Then, in a whisper that barely carried over the wind, she said, "When I was a little girl growing up in this county, the old folks used to tell a story. They said that on the nights of the worst storms, things come out of the woods. Things that can take the shape and the voice of the person you love most in the world. They do it because they can't come inside unless you open the door for them." To this day, many of the oldest residents of Dark County will tell you the same thing. If you are ever trapped in a storm and you hear a familiar voice begging you from the dark to let them in, make sure you look closely before you turn the lock, because sometimes the voice you know best belongs to a complete stranger. It makes you wonder about the spaces just outside our vision, doesn't it? The corners of the world we think we know perfectly well, which can turn into something entirely unrecognizable when the lights go out and the storm rolls in. We trust our senses. We trust the voices of the people we sleep next to every night. But perhaps that familiarity is the exact weapon the dark uses against us. I'm Alex Vane, and you've been listening to Unquiet Corners. If this story found its way into your thoughts, consider subscribing to the channel for more. Leave a comment below if you've ever heard something calling your name from a place it shouldn't be. If the person you love most came knocking on your window tonight, soaked to the bone and begging for shelter, how sure would you be that it was really them?